Laura Mitchell always believed that life changes slowly, like seasons shifting from summer to fall. But the truth was, sometimes it changes in a single second. That second came on a Thursday evening in their quiet neighborhood outside Chicago. The house was warm and calm. A cinnamon candle burned near the sink. Soft music played from a small speaker on the counter. Laura stood in the kitchen, smiling in a way she had not smiled in a long time. Her cheeks hurt from laughing. Her eyes looked brighter. Across from her stood Daniel Carter, holding a folder in one hand, but not really talking about work anymore. He had come over to drop off some marketing files. That was the reason. That was the safe excuse. Michael, her husband of 17 years, was in Seattle for a business trip. Ethan, her 15-year-old son, was supposed to be at basketball practice. Laura felt relaxed, almost young again. Daniel was telling a story about his failed attempt at cooking Thanksgiving dinner the year before. She laughed freely, not the polite laugh she used at school meetings or family dinners, but a real one. Daniel looked at her the way someone looks when they are fully present. Not distracted, not rushing, just there. They were standing closer than friends should. Not touching, but close enough to feel the warmth between them. Then everything stopped. Laura saw movement in the corner of her eye. She turned her head. Ethan stood at the entrance of the kitchen. His backpack hung from one shoulder. His hair was messy from practice. He had grown taller recently, almost at her height now. His face was still soft with youth, but his eyes were sharp. And those eyes were frozen. He did not speak at first. He did not move. Simply looked. Daniel stepped back immediately, creating space, as if distance could erase what Ethan had already seen. The laughter disappeared from the room like smoke. "Mom?" Ethan said quietly. Laura felt her heartbeat in her ears. She could lie. She could explain quickly. She could say Daniel just stopped by for work. But something inside her refused to rush. Daniel cleared his throat. "I should go," he said softly. Laura nodded, still looking at her son. Daniel walked past Ethan, offering a polite nod, then left. The front door closed with a gentle click that sounded louder than it should have. Silence filled the house. Ethan slowly set his backpack on the floor. "Why was he here?" he asked. "For work," Laura replied. It was not fully untrue. Ethan studied her face. He had inherited Michael's quiet way of observing before speaking. He saw more than she wanted him to. "You were laughing," he said. Laura almost smiled at that. "Am I not allowed to laugh?" "That's not what I mean." She crossed her arms, not in anger, but to hold herself steady. "What do you mean, Ethan?" He hesitated. It didn't look like just work. The words hung in the air. Laura had spent months telling herself she was not doing anything wrong. No physical lines had been crossed. No promises broken out, loud. But she knew the truth was more complicated than that. She walked to the kitchen table and sat down. "Come here," she said gently. Ethan didn't move at first, then slowly took a seat across from her. She looked at her son and realized he was no longer a child. He understood enough to ask questions that mattered. "Does Dad know?" he asked. There it was. The one question she feared most. "Koa." "No," she said honestly. Ethan swallowed. "Is there's something going on?" Laura took a deep breath. She could protect herself. Or she could protect her son from confusion by telling him at least part of the truth. "I've been unhappy for a while," she said quietly. Ethan blinked. "Because of Dad." "It's not that simple." He looked down at his hands. "You guys fight sometimes, but I thought that's normal." "It is normal," she said quickly. "But sometimes people stop talking about the things that really matter." She did not say she felt invisible. She did not say she felt lonely in her own marriage. Those were adult words, heavy words. Ethan looked up again. "Are you going to leave?" The fear in his voice hit her harder than any accusation. "I don't know," she admitted. That answer scared both of them. Ethan leaned back in his chair. He looked older in that moment, as if something inside him had shifted. "I just don't want everything to fall apart," he said softly. Laura reached across the table and placed her hand over his. "I don't want that either." But she wasn't sure she still knew how to prevent it. After Ethan went upstairs, Laura remained at the table, staring at the candle as it burned lower. Her phone buzzed on the counter. A message from Daniel. "Are you okay?" She typed back. "Ethan came home early." Few seconds later, "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cause trouble." She stared at the screen. Trouble had not started that evening. It had started years ago, quietly, when conversations with Michael became short and careful. When date nights turned into canceled plans. When she stopped feeling seen. Daniel had not forced his way into her life. He had entered slowly. Breaks turned into longer talks. Talks turned into shared stories about regret and missed chances. He listened when she spoke about feeling lost. He noticed her new haircut. He asked how her day was and waited for the full answer. It felt harmless at first, then it felt necessary. Now it felt dangerous. Upstairs, she heard Ethan's door close. The sound carried weight. Laura walked to his room and knocked gently. "Ethan." "Yeah?" She opened the door. He was sitting on his bed, staring at the wall. "I'm sorry you had to see that," she said. He shrugged, but his eyes were red. "Are you in love with him?" The question came fast, like ripping off a bandage. She paused. "I care about him," she answered carefully. "But I'm confused about a lot of things." Ethan nodded slowly. "Dad's going to be hurt. I know." He looked at her, searching her face for something solid. "You always told me that if something feels wrong, I should fix it." She felt the weight of her own advice. "You're right," she whispered. That night, after Ethan fell asleep, Laura sat alone in the living room. The house felt different. Now, as if walls had heard too much. She thought about Michael, about their early years in a small apartment, about dancing in the kitchen before Ethan was born, about promises made easily before life became heavy. She had not planned to fall into emotional closeness with another man. It had happened step by step, each one small enough to excuse. Her son's frozen expression made everything clear. She was standing at the edge of something bigger than feelings. She was standing at the edge of her family's trust. Her phone buzzed again. "Daniel, we need to slow down." She typed. "Yes." Then she added, "I have to tell Michael." Her finger hovered over the send button, but she pressed it. The message felt final. For the first time in months, she felt both terrified and strangely calm. Secrets had grown too large. Hiding was exhausting. Upstairs, Ethan shifted in his sleep. Laura looked toward the staircase and understood that whatever happened next, her son would remember this moment. He would remember how she handled it. Sko could continue pretending nothing serious had happened. Or she could face the truth and risk everything. The next morning, she made coffee before sunrise. She stared out the window as the sky slowly turned, pink over the quiet street. When Michael walked through that front door in a few days, she would tell him, not because she wanted to break her marriage, but because silence had already started to break it. And if there was any chance to repair what was cracked, it had to begin with honesty, even if honesty hurt. Even if her son had to see her imperfect. Even if everything changed. Because in that kitchen, when Ethan froze and looked at her like, he no longer recognized the woman standing there. Laura understood one simple truth. She could not ask her family for trust while living behind a lie. Michael came home on Sunday afternoon. The sound of his car in the driveway made Laura's chest tighten. She had barely slept for 3 nights. Every possible outcome had played in her mind. Our shouting, silence, bags packed at the door. When he walked in, he looked the same as always. Navy jacket, travel-worn suitcase, calm face. He smiled lightly. "Hey," he said. Laura felt how fragile that simple word was. "Hey," she answered. Ethan stayed upstairs. He had known this moment was coming. The house felt still, like it was holding its breath. Michael set his suitcase down and looked around. "Everything okay?" he asked. Laura nodded once. "Can we talk?" He studied her face. The seriousness in her eyes erased his smile. "Sure." They sat at the kitchen table where so many normal conversations had happened. School plans, grocery lists, bills. Today the table felt like a courtroom. Laura folded her hands to stop them from shaking. "I need to tell you something important," she said. Michael didn't interrupt. She chose her words carefully. She spoke about feeling distant, about how their talks had turned into short updates instead of real connection. She admitted she had grown close to someone at work. She didn't dramatize it. She didn't blame him. She didn't paint herself as a victim. She told the truth. "It's a man named Daniel," she said quietly. "We became close, emotionally." Close? Michael's face changed slowly. Not explosive, not loud, just pale. "Emotionally close," he repeated. "Yes." He leaned back in his chair. "How long? Few months?" He looked down at the table. "Did it go further than that?" She held his gaze. "No, but it crossed a line in other ways. And Ethan saw us standing too close the other day." That hit harder than anything else. Michael closed his eyes briefly. "Ethan knows." He saw enough to ask questions. Silence filled the room. The clock on the wall sounded louder than ever. "Do you love him?" Michael asked. Laura paused. She had asked herself that question over and over. "I care about him," she said. "But what I felt most was that he listened to me. I felt seen." Michael swallowed. "And I don't see you." Her eyes filled with tears. "Not lately." The words were not cruel. They were tired. Michael stood up and walked to the window. He looked outside at the quiet street, the same street, where Ethan had learned to ride his bike. 17 years, he said softly. "And this is how I find out you're unhappy." "I should have said it louder," she replied. "I should have pushed harder for us." He turned around. "Instead, you found someone else." "I found someone who reminded me what we used to be." The honesty hurt, but it was clean. No shouting, no insults. Just pain laid out on the table. Upstairs, a door creaked. Ethan was listening. Michael noticed. His shoulders sank. He shouldn't have to hear this. "I know." Michael walked past her toward the hallway. "I need some air." The front door closed gently behind him. Laura stayed at the table, staring at the empty chair across from her. It looked like something had already left. An hour later, Michael came back. His face was calmer but distant. "I'm sleeping in the guest room tonight," he said. She nodded. She had expected that. That evening, the three of them ate dinner together in silence. Forks touched plates. Water glasses clinked. No one mentioned the truth sitting between them. After dinner, Ethan cleared his throat. "Are you guys getting divorced?" he asked. Michael looked at Laura. She answered first. "We don't know." Yet Ethan's jaw tightened. "I don't want you to stay together just for me," he said. "But I also don't want you to give up without trying." Michael studied his son carefully. "That's fair," he said quietly. That night, Laura lay alone in their bedroom. The empty space beside her felt colder than she expected. She realized something important. The excitement she once felt with Daniel had faded into something smaller. What remained now was the weight of real life. The next morning, Michael suggested counseling. Laura agreed immediately. Their first session was uncomfortable. They sat side by side on a couch that felt too small. The counselor asked simple questions. When did you start feeling distant? When did you stop sharing? What do you need now? Answers did not come easily. But they came. Michael admitted he had buried himself in work to avoid feeling like he was failing at home. Laura admitted she had stopped asking for attention because she feared rejection. Neither of them had wanted to fight. So they avoided the hard talks. Avoidance had built a quiet wall between them. Weeks passed. The house felt tense, but not broken. Michael remained in the guest room. Laura ended things clearly with Daniel. The message was short and respectful. She needed to focus on her family and herself. Daniel replied with understanding. There were no dramatic goodbyes. The real work was at home. One evening, after a long counseling session, Michael stayed in the kitchen while Laura washed dishes. "Why didn't you tell me you felt invisible?" he asked. "I tried in small ways," she answered. "But when nothing changed, I stopped trying." He nodded slowly. "I thought providing was enough. It's important," she said gently. "But I needed more than that." The conversation did not fix everything. But it was honest. That was new. Ethan watched carefully in the weeks that followed. He noticed when his parents sat together on the couch. He noticed when they spoke without tension. He also noticed when silence returned. One night before Thanksgiving, Ethan joined them at the table after dinner. "I've been thinking," he said. "If you both still care, then fight for it. Not with each other. For each other." The simplicity of his words cut through the confusion. Michael looked at Laura. For the first time in months, there was no anger in his eyes. Only sadness and a small spark of hope. "Do you still want this marriage?" he asked her directly. Laura answered without hesitation. "Yes, but not the version we were living." "I want something better." He nodded. "So do I." That was the turning point. They began scheduling time together deliberately. Walks in the evening, coffee on Saturday mornings. Real talks without phones nearby. Some conversations were hard. Old disappointments surfaced. But instead of shutting down, they stayed. Trust did not return overnight. Michael had moments of doubt. Laura had moments of guilt. But both chose to remain present. Gradually, the house felt lighter. One early spring evening, Laura burned pasta while distracted by a joke Michael made about his failed attempt at baking cookies. They both laughed. The sound awkward at first, then natural. Ethan walked into the kitchen and paused. Months ago, he had frozen at the sight of his mother standing too close to another man. Now he saw his parents standing side by side, shoulders brushing, laughing over something simple. He didn't freeze. He just watched for a second, then smiled. Slightly. Laura caught his eye. She saw relief there. Not perfection, not fairy tale happiness, just relief. Later that night, Michael returned to their bedroom. No grand announcement. He simply brought his pillow back. They lay side by side. In the quiet dark, "I'm still hurt," he admitted. "I know," she whispered. "But I'm willing to rebuild." So am I. The road ahead was not smooth. They both knew that, but it was real. Laura understood something deeply now. The emotional connection she had searched for outside her marriage was not just about another person. It was about neglected parts of herself. Instead of escaping, she had finally faced them. She had hurt her husband. She had shaken her son's sense of stability. But she had also chosen honesty when it mattered most. And that choice changed everything, not because it erased the past, but because it gave them a chance to write the next chapter together, awake and aware. In the end, their family did not return to what it once was. It became something more careful, more intentional, more honest, and sometimes that is stronger than perfection.